Today, I'm doing some tasting notes for the first ever beer that I made roughly 6 months ago, an American Amber Ale. So getting on for half a year ago now, I did my first batch of beer, an extract brew. This was it. It's an American Amber Ale. It goes by many names: Californian Common Ale, Hybrid Amber Ale, etc, etc, etc. So many names. The bottom line is, it's beer. However, this isn't going to be your ordinary beer review, because I'm going to pick a whole load of holes in this. I'm a strong believer that your first brew has the steepest learning curve, and there's so many things that went wrong with this beer, but if you don't improve, then your beers aren't going to get better, I guess. Let's crack it open. Now, the first thing I wanted to talk about was actually the yeast that I used for this beer. Now, straight off the bat, on the nose, you just get kind of bam, yeast right in your nose. And I know the reason for this. Number one, I used Danstar Nottingham for the yeast strain for this particular beer, which it does kind of match kind of the American ale style, a yeast that kind of has medium to high flocculation. However, in this case, I would say with this beer, the yeast didn't flocculate very well, and that's really why we got those yeasty notes left in there. Secondly, it was probably due to fermentation temperatures being a little too high. They could have been around about 18 degrees, but the thing just kicked off and it produced its own temperature. It was hitting 21 some days. So that's the reason for the yeast. Let's glass this. Just a little bit of information about some of the ingredients. Only one variety of hops used for my first brew. They were Cascade. So kind of a very clean, fresh hops with a few citrusy notes. Right, that'll do. Ooh, can you hear that? If the laptop fan wasn't on, you'd be able to hear that better. Okay, first off, not much head retention at all. Not much head retention. In subsequent brews, I've started to use chemicals to help with that head retention. I think it's not due just to the beer. It's probably due to a glass sometimes that has been improperly cleaned. Some residue left over from washing up liquid, which obviously kills the yeast. The head. Kills the head. Secondly, with this beer, we carbonated it to 2.2 volumes of CO2. So slightly overcarbonated for my liking. But regardless, again on the nose, you get the yeast, but you also do get the freshness of the hops and little kind of citrusy twang going on there. And on the nose, I've noticed that the more times you actually smell it, the hops tend to take a back seat, and then that caramelly malt flavour comes through, which is really nice. But on the upside, really nice colour. Only slight chill haze, really not much at all. Have a good close look at that. So without further ado, let's do a taste. Again, the hops come right through there. Really clean, really fresh. I don't just want to make this a generic taste test. And I think with Cascade hops especially, kind of makes you feel like you're out in the forest, They don't have that that wood kind of aroma and flavour, so to speak, but it's kind of that outdoorsy, fresh experience, and that's nice to get that from a beer. Again, the yeast comes through on the taste as well. I would say that because of the overcarbonation, some of those flavours are kind of a little bit hindered. Maybe that's the right word to use. It's just a little bit overbearing for me. I like a good balance when it comes to a beer. On the tongue, in the background there, after you just let it simmer for a minute or two, the hops come back, but with slightly more bitterness. And then after that, probably again due to the hot fermentation temperatures, starting to get just a little bit of kind of hot alcohol twang on the back of the tongue. Just bosh right in there, Little to no lacing. Again, this is something I really want to address on the next brew. Once you start to have a little bit more of this particular beer, those hops, again, just like on the nose, tend to take a little bit of a back seat. The maltiness comes through, that kind of sweet caramel hit from the malt. And everything, just, to be honest, one of the only upsides of this beer, right, I've kind of cut it apart because, you know, it's your first brew and it's not going to be great. But one of the only upsides of this particular beer is that it hangs on. And a lot of the times, especially with commercial beers, some kind of craft beers that even some pubs sell, the beer just doesn't hang on. It feels like you've just drunk air. And that's one of the greatest things about homebrew, I think, is that the flavour stays, the flavour evolves, and it's all kind of about this perpetual mouthfeel. It's great. It's absolutely great. There really isn't much else for me to say about this beer, except so much as improvement has been made since I did this first ever batch. And I think really your first ever brew kind of gets you to understand your equipment, your workflow, especially on brew day. Overall though, folks, not a bad first brew. Completely drinkable. Your first brew, definitely important, folks. This is going to sound kind of strange, but I would personally recommend that you do heavily scrutinise the first ever batch of beer that you ever make. Like I said, otherwise you're never going to improve. Some of the best beers in the world have come from individuals who just want to improve constantly, and they've just refined it and refined it and refined it. And neither am I a tasting expert, but when you taste your own beer, there's that personal connection with what you did, and to a certain degree it's almost a little bit of nostalgia, isn't it? So I thank you for watching, and happy Homebrew Wednesday.